Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the City of York Council Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education. Thank you for coming to West Offices on what is quite a miserable, wet evening. I do appreciate you coming. As you are aware, this is the first meeting of our new year, 4 meetings of SACRE, and one of the first things that we need to do is the appointment of a chair to take us through the meetings for the next year. Does anybody have any nominations for the chair? And just reminding members that the chair in the previous year has been Councillor Cuthbertson. If there's no nominations, we could, yes, sorry. Councillor, yes, I should explain. In front of you, you've got a microphone. So if you, there is a, towards the left, there is a rectangle with a, thank you.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I'll nominate Councillor Cuthbertson.
So we're going to do sort of some very active put into practice the training that we've just had. So in order to determine the outcome of this, so we have 2 nominations now. We have, who are both appropriately nominated. We have Councillor Fitzpatrick and Councillor Cuthbertson. Could I ask that you now go into your respective committees? Each committee, as you are aware, has 1 vote, and then I will seek the views of each committee as to your preferred nomination support.
Are we entitled to 30 seconds?
Yes, yes, you are, absolutely. So in order of nomination, so if I invite Councillor Fitzpatrick to put forward a few comments.
Well, thank you. I have to say this has come as a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting this at all, so I haven't really prepared for this. But I'm not going to stand down because people have put their trust in me, so I will put myself forward. Yes, I've been on here now for a number of years since I was elected for a 2nd time in 2019. I am very interested in faith, and I'm particularly interested in diversity, and I work quite a lot with the diverse communities within the city as well as faith groups. So yes, I'm interested in the work of this committee. My background is education. I'm an Ofsted inspector and a teacher, so I have been very involved in schools, and I have been a governor of a York school. So yes, I cover all bases, I feel.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbertson?
Yeah. Thank you. I didn't expect that we'd find ourselves with an election on our hands, the first meeting of my 2nd term on this body. I chaired last year, and it was in many ways a pleasure and a privilege. It did have a slightly onerous aspect, which was to create with RE today and with Olivia in particular, her helpful advice, the new agreed syllabus, and to put it to both SACRE and to the sort of assembled RE teachers. And it seems to have met with general approval, which was not just a surprise because it was a well-written document, but it was good to see it actually happen in practice. So I've been on the council now since actually 2003, although I missed out 4 years from 2007. Much of that time I've been involved with children education and community scrutiny, or with the corporate parenting board. I'm been a part-time teacher of adults and basically post-compulsory education, so post-16, for about 15 years, not practiced in the last 6 or 7 years, but it's part of my belief that young people whether they're in school or whether they're training to be professionals, should be taught well and by people who are experienced in their craft. And I came to that from a professional standpoint rather than a teaching standpoint. But I loved doing it. So children, young people, I'm also a dad, granddad, stepdad, step-granddad. And just lately I've become a step-great-granddad. So, you know, I'm a family man who's experienced actually one or two of the tragedies that families experience. And I can bring, I suppose, a fairly broad view of the world, particularly in having brought up somebody else's children, which for me has been both a worrying at times, but a most enriching and ennobling experience. I never thought I'd be a family man when I was a younger person, but I am now. I'm committed, and for the rest of my days, I'll be a family man. Not directly to do with this, but if you think about the business of transferring and passing on our belief, whether it's in a faith or in, if you like, the organisation of faiths and its teaching in schools, that's me. And I hope that however this organisation proceeds, I'll remain a member of it and I'll be able to deliver that, whether I'm chair or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now ask that you break out into your respective groups in order to consider the information that you've heard? You will be asked to put forward a vote for the nominee that you prefer to be the chair of SACRE for the remainder of this year, this academic year. So I think if we just adjourn at this moment whilst you break out into your groups. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Could we now go through the committees and take a note of the vote that you have chosen to cast? So firstly, if we approach Group A, do we have a nominee to speak on behalf of Group A?
Yeah.
We agreed to support Councillor Cuthbertson.
So Group B.
Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you. And Group C.
Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you. And Group D.
Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you. So on that basis, it's a unanimous decision that Councillor Cuthbertson is appointed as chair of the committee. So we'll just invite the two councillors back into the meeting. I would like to thank Councillor Cuthbertson and Councillor Fitzpatrick for their patience whilst each of the groups undertook deliberations. The outcome is, having taken the vote from each of the groups, is that Councillor Cuthbertson be nominated as the chair of SACRE for the forthcoming year.
Thank you. I will take on that responsibility. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have we got a nomination for vice chair, did you say, Janie?
Councillor Cuthbertson, we don't have any nominations at this moment in time for the vice chair, though I would advise that the nominee for the vice chair is perhaps from a different group, so i.e. not from Group D.
Yep. So,
Chair, the situation is we can invite nominees for the vice chair to come forward at this point in time, if there are any.
in which case I'll take it from what you've just said, that we're inviting nominees from possibly Group C, possibly other groups, to come forward. But A, B or C, yes, thank you.
Because this is kind of sprung, it's because this has been sprung on everybody, Chair. One alternative solution is that each of the groups consider between now and the next meeting potential nominations for the vice chair. And as you will go through later in the Constitution, there are roles and responsibilities, and also the SACRE guidance also has defined roles and responsibilities for various positions involved in delivering SACRE. We can obviously circulate those, but Chair, it might be most pragmatic for us to invite each of the groups to consider nominations for the vice chair, and then we can address the appointment of the vice chair at the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a sensible thing in the light of the current circumstances. I'd just like to thank people who nominated both Fiona and myself. I hope you don't mind me using first names. It's not formal, I know, but and for your votes, whichever side you voted for. It's good to have how can I put it, a clear result, and to have a bit of electoral competition, whoever's on the winning or losing side. And I've been on both, so thank you for that.
Chair, can I just say something? Congratulations
Thank
to
you.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Before we start the meeting proper, I just want to say two things. First of all, welcome to a couple of new members. First of all, Thomas.
Taco.
Taco, I beg your pardon. And your surname is Michel.
Michiels, but yeah, Michiels. Michiels.
Michel.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Belgian, so it's like Michael's, but then there's the Belgian version. I'm happy with Michael's. That's easy for everybody.
Has it got one of those funny accents over it?
No, it doesn't. It's IELS. It's like
Okay.
straightforward.
In which case, yes, I'll learn more, I'm sure, later. And I also welcome our new arrival from the mosque, Imam. I'm sorry, Imam, I don't know your name, but hopefully we'll get it on the register.
Mirazam Khan.
We've got, oh, I beg your pardon. Imam Mirazam.
Mirazam.
Okay, welcome, Imam.
Thank
And also Mr. Hodgson, who I don't think I've met before. In which case, anyway, welcome again.
Yeah, I have had to give my apologies for a number of meetings due to the conflicts, but I have been kicking around a while. But thank you, Councillor.
Right. Okay, so and the last person to re-welcome is Brenda Christerson, and I know that's already been referred to, but it's nice to see you back, and I hope you, Brenda, you look so incredibly relaxed.
Thank you.
And lastly, in this initial bit, Ben Rich would like to say a few words, and I don't know what it's about.
Yeah, it was only to say I'd given my apologies for the main meeting. Actually, I will stay till 6:30, but I'm just apologise to the committee. I am leaving early, and I wanted just to share with the committee. We've talked. I've raised in the days when we were allowed to meet like this before that the Jewish community was trying to host a exhibition about Judaism in York, and you gave us some support trying to find a venue. We are now hosting it, and it will be taking place at the Castle Museum starting on, I think, the 25th of November. It coincides with the beginning of Hanukkah this year, and it's chance to learn about Judaism and also learn about the Jewish community of York. And whilst we'll try and organise some events there, and I'll certainly suggest that all the SACRE members are invited for a special visit, we're also quite keen that the school should know that it's there. It's there for 2 months, and it's an opportunity for us, hopefully, not to have to go into quite so many schools, at least this year, because they can learn on the spot.
If you could send us the details of that specifically, we can ensure it's circulated.
Lovely, I'll definitely do that. Remind me, chase me.
Okay, thank you, Ben. We look forward to that, and we'll allow you to slip away gracefully. Okay. Okay, so item 3 on the agenda is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. I know you've got at least one apology to give us, Angela.
Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Rowley and Kate Bailey.
Can I check whether anybody has any matter on which to declare an interest? A matter in tonight's agenda, preferably. No? Okay. In which case, we'll move on then to the minutes of the previous meeting, which is agenda item 4, and those are at page 3 in your agenda pack. Can I just go through them page by page? So if you have a query, please say so. I'm going to ask about page 3 first of all. Any questions? No. Page 4. And page 5. And we're good. Maxine, are you going to mention questionnaires? Right, okay, thank you. And we've covered the agreed syllabus launch around about the time. And I think feedback from the SACRE conference was brief, but an interesting experience for those of us who attended. So that's page 6, and lastly, page 7. So can we take it that those minutes are agreed then? Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to move on now to an update on progress from the Director of Governance and the Monitoring Officer, which is agenda item 5.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably bringing into practice the training that we have just received from Olivia. It is correct and proper that SACRE does ensure that its governance documents, in this case its constitution and the supporting guidance, remains up to date and fit for purpose, and also enshrines many of the issues raised by SACRE in their handbook and their national guidance. At this present time, City of York Council is currently in the process of reviewing its main constitution, and the documents that are here before you at Annex 1, which is starting on page 11, subject to the approval of yourselves and thereafter being adopted by full council, will feature prominently within the council's revised constitution going forward. As you are aware, we brought a noted or a commentary version of the Constitution to the last meeting for you to consider, and that was aimed partly at supporting the training that was delivered today and prompting questions so that you could see how we developed the Constitution going forward. And we have, removed those comments, and now for consideration by SACRE this evening, this Constitution is placed before you. As you will know, we've broken down, starting on page 11 and going on to page 12, the groups that we're referred to. And so that is the particular groups that you all represent. We've been very comprehensive in this document, included terms of office, the position around co-opted members, the confirmation of appointments, the functions and duties of SACRE. And basically, this is why you are a member. This is the expectations of what it means about being involved in a member. And this is the governance framework by which you are asked to make decisions and following, understanding the meetings, when you should attend, when it's okay to give apologies, etc. So hopefully this is a very useful plain English guide to assist you and support you as members of SACRE. It is very comprehensive. I would say that it is also good practice that SACRE does ensure that this document, once approved, remains fit for purpose. So featuring in future work programmes will be potentially an annual review of this governance framework to ensure that it's still meeting the needs of yourselves as York SACRE, and also still adheres to the national guidance, which is published by SACRE. I'm happy, Chair, to take any comments, or we can discuss particular items, but I would also sort of invite you to consider, given that we've asked the groups to consider nominations for a vice chair, that we perhaps use this documentation to help in provision of supporting guidance to the respective groups about the roles and responsibilities expected of key leaders in SACRE, key roles and responsibilities. And perhaps you could use the information that we've provided in terms of the roles and responsibilities for the chair, which are equivalent are absolutely correct for the vice chair, who will chair the meeting in the absence of the chair. So perhaps it's part of active learning to take away for all of the groups to consider this document and help formulate the nominations going forward for the vice chair in readiness for the next meeting in January. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, or comment on any observations that any members may have.
If I may make an observation, Janie, first of all, to thank you for altering the format from the previous annotated version, which it works as a working document, but possibly not as a formal document. And this document actually fits the same kind of typeface and font size as the rest of the agenda for tonight. So that's very welcome, and thank you for doing that. So any comments from anybody else? I'll leave it for a moment. No? Okay, in which case, on the basis that what we have before us represents what was actually agreed at the previous meeting in relation to the Constitution, can we accept this as the agreed version, which we will put to the local authority? Is that acceptable? Good. In which case, thank you for that, members. Can I ask Jenny or Maxine, are you going to cover the draft annual report?
Olivia and myself.
Oh, sorry, Olivia, beg your pardon. Right, Olivia.
So colleagues, just to draw your attention to, as you know, as was mentioned on our training earlier this evening, that one of our statutory responsibilities as a SACRE is to provide an annual report of our roles and responsibilities and our work. And that must be submitted to the Department for Education, to the Secretary of State, within a particular time frame. This year, we have been provided with an updated expectation of what that annual report should include. And what you have in agenda item 6 is an outline of what is required of us and the framework that Maxine and myself as officers will be creating an annual report from. The time frame is for it to be submitted to the DFE by the end of this calendar year or as soon as possible thereafter. And we're conscious that the time frame of our SACRE meetings means that our next meeting isn't until January. We haven't produced a draft as yet because we were waiting for this document that outlined for us what was required. And there is some national training on the annual report on Thursday evening that we're attending that will also give us some updated information on what is required of us as a SACRE. So there will be some need for Maxine and myself to create a draft and to circulate that draft to members through the clerk in the time leading up to the next meeting, so that any comments, any amendments can be fed through, so that the final draft comes to the meeting in January for us to formally vote in our groups and approve it. We appreciate that's not normally the pattern that we would undertake, and that there would be a chance in a meeting to look at a draft. But of course, it is because of these changed guidelines that we are not providing a draft tonight. What we're providing is the framework that we will work to. I don't know if Maxine, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've summarised that really well, Olivia. As you've said, we were waiting for this revised guidance to be able to meet the new expectations around the SACRE annual report. You have an outline in your pack, which takes you through the structure of that new report now. So it gives you an overview of what to expect in that draft. We will be working on it in the next few weeks and aim to get that out to you as quickly as possible, so that you've got a chance to look at it and provide us with feedback prior to Christmas.
But hopefully you can see, and again, this links to the training that we've just had preceding this meeting, about some of those expectations in terms of our activities as a SACRE, in terms of our monitoring role, and how we then report that as a committee. And as you know, in the previous meeting, we approved questionnaires to go out to schools, and that will happen this term. That will give us some of the information that we need in order to fulfill the requirements in here. But as we go through our meetings this year and are thinking about our development plan as a SACRE, hopefully this framework will also provide us with some helpful areas to consider in terms of the work of SACRE over this year, so that our annual report next year we're able to illuminate and tell the story of our schools and their work in RE and collective worship. Happy to take any questions. Penny.
probably not a question relating exactly, except for the dates of the meetings. I did raise this with, maybe it was Angela, that York Interfaith Group meets the first Tuesday of every month. That's our regular slot, and usually when we're in real life, we've met in here, in this room. And I see that obviously tonight we have a meeting at 7:30. So we have a bit of a clash and in fact, Imam Mirazam is our main speaker tonight. And I noticed that 2 of them are just scheduled, 1st of March and 7th of June. I don't know how those dates became, what they are, because I don't remember seeing it. I might have missed it, discussing how those dates are set, but it just poses a problem for many of us who are a faith group because.
Angela, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, the meeting dates were set in line with our corporate calendar, which obviously goes on other meetings that are diarised for the council, including committee meetings. I can look at alternative dates and circulate them round, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it would really,
Yeah.
Because even when we might go back to being in person, but there's lots of things that you're doing if you're a part of that committee, which I am, and Dariush is, that you're organising and following up, and it just is a bit tricky. Thank you.
If there are not any further questions, we will, of course, Maxine and I will work on a draft, and we will communicate through the clerk whenever there is a draft available for members to comment, and we would encourage members to comment through the clerk so that we can then bring a final draft to our January meeting for discussion and then final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, for that. Maxine, are you going to talk through national data?
We don't have any. We don't have any at the moment, Chair. Obviously, there's been no publication of national data, and there won't be in the same way as in previous years.
I should have realised.
Obviously, we've got some workforce data, which we felt it would be useful for SACRE to look at today. So rather than it being national performance data, we're going to be looking at some workforce data, which is in your pack.
So we have tabled these. You should have a spreadsheet. Hopefully you can read. I think I'm struggling a little, and an overview of it, just to explain that schools are asked to report to DfE as part of the school census in the autumn term every year. And Natre, their research officer, pulls together that data and provides it for every SACRE. It's important to say that not all schools have completed that census in the last year, so that is why there will be some schools that are not on this list. And I think it's also important to say that there are the usual health warnings that apply. So the reason why we're sharing this data with you is as a starting point to consider how this sort of data might inform the work of SACRE and enable us to have that monitoring role. So in a sense, this data is a starting point for conversation. We will, of course, come back to this data at a later meeting, but I just wanted to highlight this to you this evening as part of that ongoing work that we can do, that we mentioned in training. Because you can see that this data tells that some of our secondary schools, and it is secondary only data, that some of our schools have increased the amount of time that they've made available for RE over the last year, which is a really encouraging thing for us to be able to report as a SACRE. There are other things that we may want to ask some questions about, and what this document enables us to do is for SACRE to have conversation about it, and also direct officers to have conversations with schools to help us understand the provision in our schools more effectively. As you know, we do have a responsibility to ensure that our schools are compliant. Our syllabus requires following an accredited course at Key Stage 4, but the law requires that all schools provide RE for all pupils on roll in all year groups. And so part of our role is as a SACRE, is to, through the offices, ask questions of schools where it may be from either the school website or through information that comes to SACRE, there might be non-compliance. And so it enables us to have those conversations and support schools in getting that curriculum right. So I've given you the notes to accompany this. I'm happy to take any questions, but what I would recommend that we do is that we bring this back to another SACRE meeting where we are thinking about our development plan, thinking particularly about our work in terms of monitoring standards, and this might inform us and help us to direct some of the actions that we take as a SACRE. Any questions?
Okay, does anybody want to pick up this point with Olivia? Or shall we bring it back?
Can I ask a question, Olivia? And this is obviously secondary schools. Can I just ask what we do about primary schools? Now I'm out of it.
In terms of monitoring. That is something that I think as a SACRE we do need to consider more fully in terms of what are going to be the activities that we undertake that enable us to know our schools well. One of the ways in which we can do that ongoing, and we have done previously, there has been understandably a hiatus because of the last 18 months, is through Ofsted reports. And so one way in which we do that for both primary and secondary is that in SACRE meetings, any Ofsted inspections that have taken place of York schools since the last inspection, a summary of the reports, the officers would create that in some fashion that would enable SACRE members to have an oversight of any comments that are made about RE as part of those Ofsted inspections. Another way that we do that is through those questionnaires that we approved at the last SACRE meeting. So that is in its infancy, but that is one action we've taken as a SACRE for this year ongoing, that questionnaire is one mechanism of receiving information from our schools that helps us to understand the curriculum decisions and the outworking of the syllabus in practice. But there will be other ways that we can do that ongoing through planned visits to schools, through our teacher representatives inviting other teachers to come and speak to SACRE that enable us to have a range of evidence that enables us to understand how the curriculum is realised in our schools.
And one of the things that we're doing at the moment through the visits that the effectiveness and achievement advisors are doing in schools is when we're doing a teaching and learning review, we're looking at all aspects of the curriculum, and so we're picking up RE as part of that, and there's a programme of those taking place over the year.
Okay, great, thank you, Olivia. Moving on then, Maxine, are you going to cover the development plan progress?
Yes, we have a draft of the development plan, and it's one of the things that we want to begin to really work on in the next meeting. So we'll bring that final draft to you. One area that I do feel that it would be useful for SACRE to begin to focus on is how we get the voice of young people into SACRE, because obviously that's going to be very important for really monitoring the quality of the experience of RE in schools. And it's certainly, Olivia and I talked about the ambition of having a children and young people's voice element into SACRE, and perhaps even having a youth SACRE, and asking our very good teacher reps in the city to begin to think about how they could develop that youth element to SACRE in York. We're always very proud of the youth work that takes place in the city, and I think having a youth SACRE would add considerably to the different youth groups that we have, and it would give, I think, a real strength to the monitoring of RE in schools if we've got that direct work from young people themselves. So in much the way that we've had young ambassador work in the city where they've looked at aspects of the way that city works for them, I think developing that in the coming year would be top of my priorities, that we actually do get that voice of children and young people into the work of SACRE.
Yes, I think it would be an interesting thing to take forward. Fiona.
I think that sounds eminently sensible, Maxine. I think that's the right way forward. And the other elements that interest me when we were looking at the curriculum and we were looking at the syllabus and how it might be, was the element in there of anti-racism as well, as opposed to just, listening to about other faiths. It's actually, quite specific about anti-racism and that element in schools, as low down as possible, primaries also as well. So presumably there'll be an element of that reflected in the development plan.
Yeah, very definitely. What we want to do, obviously, is we do want to encourage schools to think really, really carefully about how they're promoting equality and diversity. It's something that Ofsted will be looking at as part of the assessment of British values and the way in which schools develop cultural awareness across the curriculum. So yes, definitely. And also, obviously, we want to listen to young people's voice, particularly about their experience of bullying and where that's related to particular issues related to faith.
One of the things that one of the documents that you have in your pack for this evening is an overview of feedback from schools on the agreed syllabus. And whilst it is early days in implementing the agreed syllabus, I thought it would be helpful for members to see an overview of the feedback that we've already received from schools, because we hope that this will help members to think about and consider when we do meet next time to consider the development plan, how some of the feedback from schools might inform some of the decisions we take about our next steps as a SACRE. You will see, and I'm very pleased to report this. I appreciate I have a vested interest because I put a lot of energy into the agreed syllabus last year, but it is encouraging to hear that unanimously the schools that have fed back have felt that the syllabus is effective, that it's clear, that it is meeting their needs even at this early stage, and particularly around those conversations about curriculum, coherent curriculum design. I won't read the report to you, you have it in front of you, but you will see that there are some elements in terms of feedback, things that can be improved. Some of those are things that perhaps sit outside our remit in terms of resourcing, but there are some things in there that might inform decisions that we make about training being available to our schools. I think in particular, we do need to consider how we support schools with the Ofsted conversation about curriculum, how they respond to the research review that was published in the summer term for religious education, how we equip them to have those conversations about how they have created a curriculum, because the agreed syllabus is a framework, but then schools need to then realise that into a bespoke curriculum for their schools and that support with it. So that document is there for you to, by all means, ask questions now, but when we do talk in more detail about the development plan next time, hopefully this will inform some of the decisions that we take as members. Sorry, Ian.
Could I just, it's really following on from what you're saying, Olivia, could I request that in the development plan, in the draft of that development plan, there is a particular focus on non-religious worldviews? My reasoning for this is obviously from my own perspective, but also from the perspective that this is a new element to the work of SACRE and to schools as well. And I think one of the comments was around more detailed guidance in terms of that. I think I did make some comments when we were reviewing the syllabus, which I do think is very good, but I think that the place of non-religious worldviews is somewhat subdued. You know, it's not prominent enough from my perspective, given the proportion of the population who don't hold religious views. So I would, as we go forward, I would like to see more education on non-religious worldviews, both the members of the committee and the work of schools going forward, and perhaps to think about that being incorporated in the 5-year review. But as you were saying in the training, we need to keep that going. So I'd like to see it right from the word go, if that's okay.
Just to reassure the member that we did on the launch day, there was a particular focus on non-religious worldviews as part of the training for schools, alongside that broader conversation about religion and worldviews and that new language and new way of thinking about how schools shape their curriculum. So absolutely we'll ensure that that is part of the picture in the development plan.
Imam.
Yeah, sorry, I must take leave. I have to go. But I just wanted to just point out one thing from a Islamic perspective, that if some guidelines could be provided to imams and teachers locally and nationally with regards to what they could maybe provide to the schools. For instance, we have school tours, mosque visits, but maybe just have some broad guidelines on those topics would be helpful for us as well. Thank you.
One of the things that we did provide in partnership with Interfaith York for schools at the launch was how Interfaith York can support visits and visitors. So York Mosque was represented as part of that package of information, and there has been very recently some national guidance written on visiting mosques, and it has only just I've only just received it, so apologies that it's not on tonight's agenda. But in terms of our information to schools, and I absolutely will pass it on to members as well. We'll build that into the networks this year.
Thank you. I must take leave, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Are you okay to find your way out? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Emma. Right. Okay. Do we have a SACRE update at all?
Yes, Chair, there's agenda item 9. There is a paper that goes with
Sorry,
that,
I should have.
the national.
It's in your second lot of papers, members.
It is, and I will be brief, but it's just to highlight some things that nationally have happened recently. One of them, which I think might be of interest to members, is the research that was undertaken by Columbus and Gabriel's Trust in the summer term about British public values and an understanding of worldviews and the role in RE, and I have given you an overview of that research. There is an attachment that gives you a summary of that research and an encouragement that the British public value the place of religious education and how it's taught in schools and enabling our children and young people to understand religious and non-religious worldviews. So I'm happy to take any questions related to that, but I thought it was a helpful piece of research that might be of interest to members. Also to highlight, as you know, we are a member of SACRE, and SACRE is providing virtual webinars this term. And there is a link in the paper if you want to, as an individual SACRE member, attend that training. I know we have shared some of it with you before, but I think it's great that the SACRE are providing these virtual webinars for SACRE members alongside the individual training that we will undertake as a SACRE. And just a couple of other key things, key dates coming up to be aware of. As you know, and Penny spoke to us last time about Interfaith Week, and again, that encouragement for our schools to engage with it. And I know that the local RE network were talking about the activities that they might undertake for Interfaith Week, and we will continue to remind schools of that. And also Holocaust Memorial Day in January. And again, there's a whole range of training available to schools that we will make them aware of. I don't know if Penny, you want to say anything about Interfaith Week?
Yes, we're in the throes of putting it together. We always have good contribution across the board from variety of faiths, don't we? Off. Sorry, it's gone off. I did have it on, I promise. It's been a little fraught this year. I think because we haven't been meeting in person and everything has been on Zoom for so long, even though we have been meeting, it's just made it more of a challenge. Some of the Interfaith Week we hope will be in person this year, which will be the first time that we've met together as faith since COVID began. So that's quite a step for us, but we've actually found it quite a challenge putting things together. So I met with Olivia about doing something with the school, doing the schools and having a competition. And for us this year, it was just too much in the time frame that we had to put it together. So having discussed it with our chair and vice chair, that is something we want to do. So we either take it through to next Interfaith Week, or if you felt it was appropriate to do it at a different time of year, you know, we'd consider that as well. But we certainly don't want to not do it. We do want to do it, but this year we just haven't been able to bring it together.
I think, there have been a number of challenges, and what I would recommend, Chair, if this is appropriate, is that perhaps that we put Interfaith Week for next year on the agenda in the spring and the summer term, so that we can have a long lead in and talk about how SACRE and Interfaith York can work together on something that is schools facing, so that we can do that meaningfully. And I think in the context of schools at the moment, you know, it's a challenging term. So I think rather than rushing something and sending something out to school at this late stage, I think planning effectively for next year, I think, will be a great opportunity for SACRE to do something that schools facing, and something that SACRE might want to consider going forward is how it communicates to schools, and considering something like a SACRE newsletter that goes to schools, that some of the resources and opportunities there are for schools. That would be a simple way of, through the officers, a newsletter produced 2 or 3 times a year that highlights to schools some of the work of SACRE, but also some of those resources and training that's available. That would be a way of facing schools, because you'll note in my report that I've highlighted some of the training that's freely available to schools, and this is declaration of interest in terms of, with my regional hat on as the regional ambassador for RE, and through some funding there's a whole range of free workshops for teachers, primary and secondary, that have been sent out to schools through York SACRE. We will of course need to think about what bespoke training we want to offer as a SACRE, but it's about enabling our schools to know of all those opportunities, and I think Interfaith Week 2022 will be a great way of making that connection with schools.
Yes, and we kind of felt that perhaps, I mean, I have a son who's in his GCSE year, so it's all too, and one that took exams last year as they kind of came out. So it's all, you know, it's very much at home with me, understanding that schools are under pressure and the shifting plate of exactly what the exams are going to be even this year. So we kind of felt it at Interfaith when talking about it, that maybe schools had too much on already.
And we've made schools aware of Interfaith Week, and so schools in the city, there will be some schools that they will plan particular activities as part of Interfaith Week through their RE curriculum or through wider opportunities, and so we can still encourage that to happen and then look at something more meaningful. The last thing I just want to highlight in my paper, apologies Chair, is that just the question about anti-racism that was asked earlier, just to highlight that in the regional training that's available in this paper, just to highlight that we do have a workshop for primary teachers and a workshop for secondary teachers specifically looking at anti-racist RE, and there were some national materials that were developed called Anti-Racist RE that are incorporated into our syllabus locally, and these workshops are then a follow-on from that and a practical workshop to help schools consider how the RE curriculum can respond to that. So just to highlight that some things are already happening there.
Fiona, thank you.
Just following on from that, that sounds really interesting. In terms of us as members of this committee, I would always be interested, Maxine knows this, I'm always interested in schools and visits and things like that. Would we as members individually be able to attend some of these sessions?
Yes, absolutely. Do take a look. I'm limited by numbers on Zoom is the only limitation that there is. But the primary workshop is, well, it's not sold out because it's not costing schools anything, but it is full at 90 places. But I do have wiggle room for 1 or 2 members who, if they would like to attend. So if you just email me, I will be able to send you the joining details to attend that training. You can see the programme of training for primary and secondary in the paper.
Thank you.
Penny, sorry.
Would you be able to help circulate our Interfaith Week programme to schools? It's almost finalised. We're just waiting on some things. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, which moves us on to item 10. Correspondence on complaints or determinations.
Chair, I'm not aware of any being received. This is a standing item on our agenda for those who are new to the committee. And on this occasion, we haven't received any for consideration by the committee.
Yeah. And one thing to note is that if a complaint is made, if it's about the conduct of a lesson in school, it wouldn't come to this body. It would normally go to the head teacher and governors of the school in order for it to be determined at a local level, because that is not what SACRE is here for. Despite the name, it's not a, if you like, it's not a court of public opinion or of the committee's opinion. It's actually an advisory body, and if it needed to be taken further, that would be taken up between the school and perhaps the department, or SACRE, or whoever. Olivia may have.
It wouldn't be undertaken by SACRE. It may come to SACRE if the other channels have been appropriately covered first. So it would first go through the complaints policy of the school and the mechanisms that are in place. The key thing here is we may be dealing with complaints if it's linked to the agreed syllabus or our statutory remit in terms of our own collective worship. And the determinations is, again, the legal process. We have a determinations policy, and if a school applies for a determination, then we're required to consider it and then vote on it.
Okay. So that takes us then to urgent business, of which
There
I
are
have
none.
been notified
There's
about.
none, Chair.
Okay. And our next meeting date is the 11th of January, at which we will hopefully be approving.
Chair, we will just canvass the date because Penny has already indicated it clashes with the interfaith meetings potentially. So we will contact members outside of the meeting just to confirm the dates.
Okay, so
but
that date
provisionally, it's currently the 11th of January, but we will just contact all members outside of this meeting to confirm the dates.
Okay, great. In which case, thank you everybody for attending. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.